I regained some sight recently, still wear sunglasses, got sunburned this year. My husband was jealous. Meanwhile, Helen opened her suitcase and started rummaging until she found the doll Anne had prepared for her, which made her stop. She first gently stroked the doll, then she touched her own face, realizing the doll looked somewhat like her, and immediately became attached to her. Anne seized this moment to spell doll with her fingers, and had Helen learn through touch. To Anne's surprise, her mimicking skills were amazing. After just one lesson, Helen could replicate it perfectly. This made Anne extremely happy, yet her brother, in a dampening mood, joked she was a mimicking monkey, unaware of the gesture's meanings. Anne believed mimicking was the first learning step. Once Helen learned letter strokes, her brain would grasp their meaning. After saying that, Anne politely invited her brother out. Then she took the doll from Helen's hands, which made Helen quite upset. To calm her, Anne took out a cake from her bag. Helen's nose twitched at the sweet smell. Anne broke off a small piece for her and began to teach her how to spell cake. When Helen mimicked it correctly, Anne rewarded her with a bigger piece of cake. Helen should know correct mimicry would earn her rewards. Anne then taught her to spell doll. Although Helen seemed a bit resistant, she learned. But when she got her hands on the doll, she immediately knocked Anne to the ground. Then she quickly locked the door and pulled out the key, waving it in the air, which was just caught by her brother. By dinner time, the couple found Anne was locked in the attic. Mom searched Helen but found no key. The father had to bring a coat and carry Anne down from the window. Once everyone left, Anne quietly approached Helen. What tricks did this little witch hide? Helen felt around, confirmed no one was there, and took out the key from her mouth. This just showed that Helen's mind was completely fine. However, how to discipline her without hurting her puzzled Anne, so she wrote to the principal. At that moment, the quietly approaching Helen accidentally spilled the ink on the table. Anne wiped it up while teaching her how to spell ink. She held Helen's hand to write together, but Helen accidentally pricked her finger on the pen's tip. The pain made her go wild, and she started to smash the stop by Anne. She grabbed and threw the vase. Mom rushed in on hearing the noise, tidying up while speaking. Helen's dad thought teaching her spelling was futile. He firmly said once Helen learned enough words, one day she'll understand. Anne then gently touched Helen's hand, who soon responded. While they talked, Helen retaliated by poking Anne with the pen tip. Mom pulled her aside, making Helen even more agitated. So, Mom hurriedly shoved a candy into Helen's mouth, leaving Anne utterly confused. At that moment, Anne finally realized that Helen's tantrums were because she could get rewarded as long as she caused a ruckus. But her family's doting on Helen was much more than just a piece of candy. Next morning at breakfast, everyone sat neatly at the table, while Helen was pacing around the table, reaching out to grab food off others. Thus, the opening video scene occurred, and Helen learned obedience for the first time. However, her father found Anne's methods too harsh and decided to dismiss her. Fortunately, his wife stopped him. Due to this, Helen resisted Anne, further angering her already dissatisfied father. At night, he approached Anne for a chat, saying that if she wanted to stay, she must change her teaching attitude and show a bit more Anne retorted it was your support that made Helen so indulgent. To her, the greatest growth barrier isn't blindness or deafness, but your boundless doting. After saying that, Anne took the couple to an abandoned shack nearby, proposing to educate Helen there privately. This way, they could see their daughter every day, and Helen wouldn't feel as sheltered. Under his wife's gaze, the husband ultimately relented. He agreed to give Anne 2 more weeks. If by then there was still no change in Helen, she would have to leave. The next morning, the servants tidied up the shack, and when Helen's brother came to bring her bags, he teasingly asked, "Are you planning to tie Helen to a chair to teach her?" Seeing Anne's solemn gaze, her brother's smile gradually froze, and then he asked earnestly why she showed no compassion at all for Helen. Anne's words finally made her brother understand her teaching philosophy. Meanwhile, to give the illusion of being far from home, the parents deliberately took Helen on a 2-hour detour before arriving at the shack. When Helen stumbled in, she found herself in an unfamiliar place, agitated and gesturing for her parents. Mom instinctively wanted to comfort her but was stopped by Anne. Despite her overwhelming reluctance and worry for her daughter's good, the parents had to leave in pain. Helen, still hopeless, groped in the shack, found a hand with effort, which was Anne's her least favorite. Helen finally realized her parents left her here on purpose and began to ruthlessly wreck the room to vent her anxiety and discontent. But nothing could change the established fact. Helen eventually crawled under the bed. She remained until deep night, refusing to leave. As she hadn't eaten all day, Anne, fearing starvation, woke servant Little Black from sleep. When touching Little Black's familiar hand, Anne crawled out from under the bed. Yet, she resisted Helen strongly, so Anne taught Little Black the sign for cake. She hoped to have him help teach Helen. At that moment, when Helen saw the two signing, she immediately spelled cake on Little Black's hand. Anne quickly gave her a cake, seeing she spelled right. Helen then realized making Anne's taught signs would get her food, but she still didn't grasp the deeper meaning behind it. Helen then continued teaching Little Black other words. She pushed aside the troublemaking Helen. Surprisingly, this made Helen jealous, and she pulled Little Black's Anne away to learn actively, delighting Anne. After Helen spelled milk, Anne brought her milk. Full and content, she climbed into bed and fell asleep. To help Helen better experience the world in the coming days, Anne took her on strolls through beautiful fields, showing her the wonders of nature. Sometimes she would let her smell the flowers and feel the joy of baby birds hatching. In the blink of an eye, half of the 2-week period had passed.